It's the Wednesday Wisdom Show, and you need to know the new laws of global life. Every 10 weeks or so, after looking at the comments that I get and trying to answer them and getting a feeling of what people are perceiving, what they want, what they think they're watching, I find that it's necessary to re-clarify that even though this is a production of KabU, where we teach Kabbalah, I'm not teaching Kabbalah on this vlog. What I'm trying to do is to take insights, discoveries, findings, laws in Kabbalah, and aspects of the methodology, and try to give you insights, different ways of looking at things that will help you with your life, help you see things differently, be able to look at things in such a way that you can overcome some contradictions, even help you clarify questions, or try to make clear how nature expresses some of these things and that you're not alone in it. Because if you want to study Kabbalah, you can, and we've got all these links. They show up on the screen or they're down below, in the description of the video. So you have that opportunity, but that's too much for most people. You don't need it. But there is a general need right now that must be answered, and we have to do something to help. So what I would like to do on this show is I would like to give you some gems that are extracted from deep principles of Kabbalah to help us understand the crisis that we're now in, and to give you principles that will allow you to understand what's happening right now, ways that you can think about it, and how you could engage with what's going on. Well, what is going on? We're at a critical point, and I've talked about this before. All of humanity is at a critical point because we've come to the end of the usefulness of the force of egoism to develop us. It's been an integral part of our evolution, and it's helped us expand and grow and come to a point where we've completely used up its usefulness. We are undergoing an enormous change, and we don't feel it directly most of the time. And even if we begin to feel it, we don't have the perspective to understand what we're really dealing with. We are unprepared for this. And that's the very meaning of a crisis, a huge change with no preparation, the inability to perceive it. So what I want to share with you are clips that outline new laws of global life. And the purpose of these is so that we can see what the underlying problem is, what's at work for us. They're kind of like guide rails to help us through a huge transition. And this is a very confusing one because it's not a linear one. It's dimensionally different than anything else that we've been through. If we don't use the ego to develop, how in the world are we supposed to develop? What are we supposed to develop into? And I remember a friend of mine once told me, I was in a maze with a friend, and I was getting lost, and he found me again, lost in this maze. And he said, this was when I was, I think it was around 22 or something. He said, look, the way to get out of the maze, no matter where you are or how lost you are, is to just put your hand on the right wall and never take it off. No matter what turn you take, leave your hand on the right wall and you'll eventually come out. By the way, he was right. That's what these clips are. They're meant to help us get out of the maze by just remembering and thinking about principles. So let's take a look at the first one and then we'll talk about it. In the human system, our desires, thoughts, and actions inescapably influence each other. This law connects every individual at every level at all times. Any interaction is an expression of this law. When an individual is focused on self-interest, it forces others to do the same, creating conflicts within the system. These conflicts are amplified at the global level. Interconnection is a constant, but man's attitude can change. Changing the attitude from self-concern to global concern affects the whole system positively. And ensures its survival. This is the law of interdependency.
But at the end of the day, we all have bigger problems, right?
So up until recently, speaking about the complete interdependence and interconnection of everyone with everyone else, of everyone with everything else, of being part of a single holistic reality was like mysticism, because our lives weren't there. We weren't confronting this reality. We didn't have to adjust to it because we weren't living it. But the egoism that we have been growing with has brought us to a place where we are physically interconnected with everything and everyone else. It's impossible to take any action anywhere without it actually affecting everything else. This isn't some type of science fiction or mystical idea. This is what we're facing, but we don't sense it directly. We don't sense it clearly. And we're hitting the tripwires in the system. We're getting responses from the system because we don't acknowledge this. But we've grown up, it's like we've kind of outgrown our childhood clothing. We're touching every aspect. And we need to open our eyes and get the sensation that that is the place that we're actually interacting with. And because we're not consciously interacting with this, we're getting responses that we don't understand. They feel personal, they hit us personally, and we can feel that there's something strange, very different, very important, and very immediate that's going on. But it's simple. We have outgrown the ego, and we're now at a place where we feel the results of our responsibility to the whole system. There's no gap anymore. So if we act in a certain way, if we act based on the old force, on egoism, we're going to see the ripple of that everywhere, because if we don't change, it's not simply that I've got to take personal responsibility. If we don't change, then the change doesn't happen because of how interrelated we actually are. The proof that there's change and the fact of change only comes from your change. It doesn't come from somewhere else. It won't be that you won't change and everybody else will, and everything will get better. No, because of the complete interrelatedness, your change will result. It isn't actually that it results in those other changes, it is that change. And you have your hand on the control. Now, we have to understand what has to change, and you see that the graphic that comes up at the end is that nature doesn't change, humanity must. What we're up against and what we're feeling is that is the law of nature, and we're not like that. And the fact that we're up against it means we're being asked to change, and we only get asked to change or to grow by nature when it's actually possible to fulfill that growth. But who are we in this process? Once we get to this kind of global awareness and responsibility, am I still using this physical body? Are those the things that I've got to do? Let's look at global law number 2.
Human beings are naturally motivated to seek lasting pleasure. However, when their desire meets the pleasure, the desire is gradually extinguished. The resulting emptiness motivates the individual to once again seek fulfillment, creating an endless cycle of fleeting pleasures. Exhausted by this cycle, an individual is forced to seek an entirely new and different motivation for fulfillment. This can only be found outside of the regular selfish fulfillment. It is the motivation to fulfill others. When this motivation reaches our global reality, the opportunities for pleasure are unlimited, extinguishing the emptiness of modern life. This is the law of motivation.
As dull as it gets, I'm pretty sure there is something in it for me.
So if we're not going to be driven by egoistic pleasure, what are we going to be developed by? A greater, deeper, more expansive pleasure that's not just locked into the idea of self. Well, what is that self? Is it people and the things that they do? The thing that's actually being evolved is the desire of the person and the direction that that desire is going to go. Because that's where our feelings are, that's where our pleasures are felt. They're felt in our needs. But the emptiness that we feel comes from the fact that we're trying to fill a very limited vessel. So if we're going to be able to live on the global level, which we're being sort of pushed to do day by day, how do we adjust to this? Where do we now look for pleasure? We look in that global vessel. We look in that collective vessel. And that's done by changing the arrow of our desire to be pointed to the whole system. Because that pleasure that is going to be available to us there, that's waiting for us, is not a limited pleasure. That's the whole point of us going through this transition. It's to find life on a greater scale, and not just to be some kind of cog in a machine, but to live this new reality with pleasure and fulfillment that is greater than the one that we felt in our limited desire. It's just that it seems counterintuitive to us to think that we can actually feel pleasure in others. But this is exactly what the law of nature is telling us, because the law of nature itself is like that. It supplies everything to us and gives pleasure to us and experiences, so to speak, its life through us. I'm anthropomorphizing. It's a law. But that's what it's asking us to do. It's saying live on this scale and on this level of fulfillment by looking for one's own fulfillment, by experiencing the pleasure of others, and by giving it to them. Let's look at clip number 3.
In a social system, an individual's success is motivated and measured by the society. The individual is constantly working to fulfill the goals of society. Being unaware of this dynamic, the individual attributes the accomplishments to oneself. This egoistic perception isolates individuals from each other, making them unaware of how they affect the whole system. At the global level, this creates crises at every strata of life, threatening the very survival of the whole. These crises help form a new perception in which the individual considers the success of the society equal in importance to his own. This change in perception provides the correct motivation for all individuals and the survival and prosperity of the whole. This is the law of success.
In reality, who has time to change?
So that dynamic of the individual's role in society has always been like that. And again, the necessity to understand and to feel it has not pressed on us the way that it is until now. Because we have to consciously shape the society that we want. Not that we have to change our political system. As far as the political systems that we in the West live in, democracies and republics and so on, they're completely adequate for this change. It's just that we don't understand our role as citizens, not on the political level, but on the level of life, the way in which society exists and why it exists. Why do we live in societies? Why do we help each other? And towards what are we helping each other? And most fundamentally, how do we help each other? So success, happiness, and the ability to live in an integrated reality is based on working towards the well-being of the whole, recognizing that that's what we are, and that's what we're working to enhance. But real bounty, true wealth, has got to do with something beyond even our own society. It has to do with the balance across the whole human network. Let's take a look at this one.
A human being's desires can only be fulfilled according to their natural purpose. An individual has physical desires and social desires. The physical desires can be fulfilled by the individual, and their purpose is survival. While social desires can only be fulfilled by others. Their purpose is the survival of the society. When an individual uses their social desires selfishly, it leads to a never-ending pursuit of more. On the global level, this produces social, economic, and political imbalance. One can choose to fulfill their social desires in two ways, for themselves or for the whole. Obviously, choosing global benefit as the aim balances the global surplus, creating positive results at all levels. This is the law of necessity and surplus.
But the sad thing is, we're all addicted to the surplus.
Just to be clear, the term global here does not mean like global trading or global banks or things outside of the sovereignty of nations. It's not a political term. It just means the largest scope of the human network. Now, the political, the social, and the economic problems that we're having are being caused by our addiction to the excess of things. All of that problematic action can be changed and stop affecting other nations and other societies negatively if we live simply according to what we actually need. We need a house, we need transportation, we need food, we need enjoyment in life, we need just, the basic good things of life. The point is that you will begin to feel the necessity that you will actually want to operate that way. And actually, you don't need more than that, and you can't get anything out of more than that anyway. You can only have, one meal at a time. You can only sleep in one bed at a time. You can only have, live in one house at a time. Now, that seems impossible, right? But we wouldn't be up against these things unless we had the capability in our next step of actually achieving this. But it isn't going to be achieved by some type of governmental organization that determines how much everybody should have and dividing everything up between everybody. That's not the point. If we have the inclination to do this, we're going to see all of these problems around the world disappear. And it doesn't matter what the political system is, not talking about a political system, but talking about keeping the law of nature in our heart. And finally, this is the part of us that we can use that will allow us to do just that.
The end result of an action is already contained in the original thought. All actions and thoughts of an individual contribute to the whole human system. When a person is unaware of their effect on the system, they automatically act with an egoistic intention. When these intentions combine, they are naturally in conflict. At the global level, a crisis reveals the initial thoughts behind our actions, so that becoming aware of these egoistic thoughts, the individuals can begin to consciously determine the purpose of their actions. it's clear to see that changing the purpose behind an action is the only way to produce positive and purposeful results. This is the law of purpose.
Unfortunately, no one ever looks at their intentions.